Okay, take three. This time, hopefully, it will all go well. All right. So, I believe things are set up correctly this time, and as people enter, I'm sure they can tell me whether they can actually hear me, so that should be pretty good. Um, all right. Yeah, third time's the charm. That's right. Cool. I think we are good then. So, uh, hooray! Everyone can hear me. So, I don't have a specific intro for this one. This is a bit of a slapdash episode. I was definitely behind. But I still do have a full, like, setup for the whole chapter. No visual yet. Okay, yeah, let me, um, hmm, let me see here. Why? Ooh, okay. Um, boy, all the settings got changed, from before, I guess. Cool, okay. I think that's it. There it is. Yeah, okay. Cool. Well, technical difficulties for some reason, but, oh, and that's the second image. Whatever. Boop, boop, boop. There's chapter 2.5's image. So, here we are. Uh, with, chapters 2.5 and 2.6. I think 2.6 is kind of a big turning point. Oh, and I still don't have an intro yet. This is some sort of parahumans worm chapter review thing. Episode 7, 2.5, 2.6. Um, Starting off with 2.5, we have the class comparisons between the sections of the city. She talks about how there's sort of no midpoint. It's all either very nice or very low end. And she's going from the low end of the city where she lives and where the docks are and where, like, Arcadia High is, or not Arcadia, Winslow High is, to the really nice downtown, which has tall buildings and wide streets and sidewalks, and it's also got, the nice school, Arcadia High, as well as the library, tons of offices and everything, downtown stuff. Um, Taylor thought about going home, but she needed to scram from the school, and she couldn't risk seeing her dad at home, and didn't want to go to the boardwalk. She says because she's seen enough of it, but probably just wanted an excuse to go downtown. She consciously compartmentalizes Emma and switches her focus to Tattletale's invitation. Is it a possible trap? Taylor doesn't think she's the type, but, this message could be from anyone. She's more worried about someone else impersonating Tattletale than about Tattletale herself setting a trap for her. She thinks, I'm gonna be careful, definitely good enough. Um, Taylor reviews in her mind the things she's learned on the internet. Information is reinforced to the audience, and she synthesizes new ideas from what she's read. She wonders who or what drew the Undersiders together. Um, oh yeah, and I have these comments from Victoria that were left behind or from Vic, because she can't be here today. Still on vacation, but she'll be back next week. Um, when the thing about Taylor not being able to go home or to the boardwalk, Victoria just says excuses. And the next bit here is that the Undersiders had different methodologies and had come from different cities. And then Victoria had said to this, She says Gru is from another city, but that didn't sound right to me. Aisha and their dad are in the city later on during certain events. And so my response was that I'm not exactly sure on that, but maybe he traveled to keep a separation from like where he lived and where he was committing crimes. Um, but even if that's not the case, we later learned that he wrote his own wiki page, so he might have skewed things on purpose to make it seem like he hadn't been as based in Brockton Bay as he was. And I think if I was able to tweak the details a bit and just sort of have it how I want, I would want him to be the only Undersider who's actually from Brockton Bay, because it just sort of makes more sense with how things line up later. Taylor considers the leadership situation of the Undersiders, decides there's no clear leadership. Vic says, this weirdly seems to upset her. Taylor's a bad communist. I thought that this kind of fits her control issues, like her being upset by it, feeling uncomfortable and not understanding when there isn't like a clear hierarchy she can point to. Taylor doesn't think that Tattletale or Regent is the uniting factor for the team. Vic says she just wants to think it's Gru, so it's so funny how her preference toward him is all encompassing. True, true. Taylor mentions Arms Master. She's also confused in the same way that he is. It's not outright stated, but it does seem obvious to me that she has just a general concern whenever she has a lack of information to go on. And you know what? David's right about Taylor and thinking about Gru. Thirsty AF. A to the F. Taylor gets to the busy downtown. She's hungry. She's got no food, no money. Her food was in her backpack that was stolen. And it's not stated, but she's still tired and previously talked about needing to force herself to eat earlier to avoid being hungry before lunch, which she still ends up feeling hungry, like now. And she's been burning lots of calories due to the increased physical activity she's been having, like, from the night before, even compared to her previous running regimen. I wasn't sure about if I was going to talk about this, but I think I'm just going to mention it here, and maybe we'll, oh no, I was going to skip this and talk about it. Okay, we'll touch on that later. To avoid dwelling on thoughts of losing the backpack and Sigma says, there certainly is, or Greg says, there certainly is a big contrast in how she described others up to this point and how she looks at Gru or even Tattletale and Regent. Yeah, there definitely is. I agree. The way that she saw the people in her school, like the normal people, versus the way that she sees these three is like very stark. She clearly is like interested in them and like wants to know what they're all about too. So rather than normal people who she kind of writes off and doesn't like, definitely goes into a lot more detail in consideration of her preference for the way they look. Yeah, I agree, David. They do, or she does do that. But here, yeah, avoiding dwelling on thoughts of losing the backpack and returning her mind to the scene at the school. She thinks about the villains again, thinking it would be funny to ask them to buy her lunch. Vic says, the things Taylor thinks are funny are so dumb sometimes. It's more obvious now that we have comedy genius Aisha around so much. It's true. It's true. Taylor feels the spotlight effect again when she's smiling in public, thinking that everyone who sees her would probably think she looks like an idiot. But she's not really worried because she's out of the area of her high school. She doesn't have people who will like actively just go after her, so it's just not that big a deal. She escapes the oppressive environment and she feels better. Shocking stuff. Taylor thinks about taking Tattletale up on her offer. She's scared and compelled by the idea. She rationalizes that she can get info to bring to the local heroes. She used the phrase, it would be a major coup for the good guys. I think that's fun. Let's see here. So we have we kind of get this point here where she's thinking of how it would be a betrayal from the Undersider's perspective if she were to get info on them, take the meeting, and then turn that info in, and then she justifies to herself that because they would already see it as a betrayal, just realizing she's a hero and not another villain, then it's fine. And as I was saying during the audiobook listening, Taylor's logic is like, oh, I've already dipped my toe in the pool. I might as well just throw my whole body in because I'm like in the pool already. So it's not really a difference. It's pretty silly. Yeah, she gets to the library, but the library is busy because it's in the dense downtown area at lunchtime. Arcadia is mentioned to be nearby, and then the interior of the library continues to show us the upscale nature of downtown, more like a museum or art gallery with high ceilings and paintings on the walls. Taylor goes to the second floor and waits for a computer. The place clears out as the noon hour is over, so people are mostly done with their lunches. Taylor waits like extra time to get a computer that's more private, which is, bare minimum precaution. I'm into it. She sends the message, "Bug here, would like to meet. Want proof you are TT. I'll reciprocate if needed." She holds on to the message and considers it for a little while. She's worried that Bakuda is laying a trap for her. She uses the cape name Bug, which I find that funny. Taylor's glad that Tattletale will have to come up with a verification method rather than her, and she rereads and sends the message. She gets a quick reply, not sure if Tattletale is reckless or just more experienced than her. And I say, why not both? Her fight or flight reaction is set off like immediately to the message. It says, "Proof? Last night you didn't say anything until I asked your name. Big guy had a mess of nasty bites and you pepper sprayed him, and I told my pal G when he asked. Good enough? G, R, and me will meet you at the same spot we crossed paths last night, K? Don't have to get gussied up if you catch my drift. Rest of us will be in casual wear. If we meet at 3, will that give you enough time to get there from the library with everything you need? Let me know. Ta-ta." And as Victoria points out, the capitalized TA and uncapitalized second TA is exactly Tattletale with the bits removed. Let's see here. And then, oh yes, I, as a joke, I said, "Doxed!" Heart pounding as she reflects on the idea that Tattletale knows where she is. She weirdly jumps to the idea that Tattletale is a hacker instead of having a thinker power. And let's see here. Vic had said, "Taylor is so fucking stupid. I do think some of this early stuff needs edited to make more sense, or some of the later stuff. Maybe more of a transition and teaching from the others on how powers work. More explanation of why normies don't understand them." And yeah, I agree. I agree with Vic. There's stuff that, or there's too much stuff that Taylor probably should have known but doesn't. And there's not enough on how information was obscured, and it kind of gets backfilled later, but it's like much, much later. So the early parts probably need an edit pass at this point to have it make more sense, like the things that Taylor does and doesn't know. I don't have like a lot of criticisms of the story, I guess, because like in my head, I have an easy time with a story that's like this fulfilling and good on like a character level and like so many other aspects that my brain glosses over some stuff. But yeah, there are some parts like this that I think are a little rocky at the start for sure. Moving on. David says, I love your cadence. It makes Tattletale come off as a 50s private detective. And then David says, yeah, pretty fair on that, but it never really bothered me. Yeah, it didn't bother me on the first pass. It only occurred to me later. But, you know, I think it would be a little more consistent if it had, if Wildbow had another go. But, like, he hasn't stopped writing, like, for the most part since this. He's taken, like, I think a minor break after Worm and a minor break after Pact, but he didn't take a break after Twig, and he didn't take a break after Ward. So he's just been writing, like, week to week nonstop for years. So yeah, I can imagine does not have any time to edit Worm. And then, yeah, so Taylor grew up with computers because of her mom. So we get another mention of her thinking of her mom. Almost always in positive light. She really, really likes and respects her mom. Oh, yeah, and 2 + 4 × 5 says, plus his chapters have gotten long. That's very right. That's very right. And then, yeah, Taylor only has the basic computer skill set that she mentions in 2.2. I think probably Taylor has, like, she has some programming skills. She has, like, all the basic skills in terms of, like, office programs, I'm sure. But, like, yeah, I can't imagine she's too advanced. I think I probably know a little more about computers than her, but probably I didn't, like, a year ago. Um, uh, I've learned a lot recently about Windows systems, but let's see here. Taylor thinks that Tattletale could have been threatening her with the drop of her location, and then Vic's comment here is, Tattletale tries to be sexy and flirty. Taylor, is she threatening me? Uh, they're meeting in civilian identities. The threat and the revealed identities don't line up in Taylor's mind. Vic says, Taylor's an idiot again. They could have just said that as part of the trap. No proof that they'd actually follow through. I kind of agree with that, but the thing is that the way Taylor responds to it is smart enough to make it fine, because she goes in her costume, doesn't reveal her identity, and she does check them out before actually, like, going up there herself. So it's not too bad. But Taylor thinks that Tattletale unwittingly raised the stakes because she'll be able to see them with their masks off. Taylor wonders what safeguards they have in place. It kind of breaks the unwritten rules that we learn about later for Taylor to do something like this, to try and gain somebody's secret identity, like their civilian identity, and then, like, use that against them in this way. It's very, like, underhanded in a way that is not acceptable to Cape society. And I don't know if at this point she realizes that or not, but, like, what she's doing is not considered fair game. Even by most heroes. She acknowledges mentally that she has no idea. Oh, the thing about the unwritten rules, though, it's not like she could have read about them somewhere. True. I do think that she could have been more savvy and have more general knowledge from parahumans online. I think that because she's a really focused person, she probably stuck to researching, like, specific things. And if she had more general Cape knowledge, it would probably suit her purposes, like, actually better. But I don't know if that's, like, the way she would have been thinking about the research she was doing. And I don't just mean in the chapters, I mean in the months leading up to this, you know. Taylor acknowledges mentally that she has no idea what she's getting herself into. And waiting long enough thinking that this, yeah, she waits long enough that the screensaver comes up, as you can see in the image there, Brockton Bay Central Library. I really like this art, by the way, so I'm going to talk about it since since it's what we're seeing. Um, it's just sort of a slightly different perspective. We don't want to have another straight on screen. And I really like it with the little Brockton Bay logo probably bouncing around the screen slowly. Um, like a DVD logo. Let's see here. David says, plus, if there are any prominent cases of public unmasking or something, she'd probably be aware of it. Yeah, she specifically has the question in her mind in a later chapter. Why aren't villains unmasked when they are prosecuted for crimes, like actually convicted? Um, and it's very rare for that to happen. And then, I mean, I think even if they go to the birdcage, their like civilian identity usually isn't revealed, and I think that's probably to do with, um, like, I mean, aside from it being good practice as like innocent, like family members of villains or whatever, not coming under scrutiny or coming under attack by their enemies, then it's still just a good idea because it sets a bad precedent. Since like we'll see later that there are large scale events that villains are able to work with the heroes on, and they're worried about ruining that kind of relationship because even though they're trying to put these people in jail, there's like actual deadly threats also. um anyway. So, Taylor considers the best and worst case scenarios and how likely she thinks they'll be. The phrase mucho cred is used, which I always think is funny. She thinks about working with Arms Master to bust the Undersiders, and about if this is a trap, how she'll get maybe a fight, a beating, and the outside possibility of getting killed. She goes for it anyway. She doesn't get a killer vibe from them, and anytime you're in costume, you can potentially get killed in a fight. Vic wanted to point something out, though, that's kind of different in this setting to a lot of other superhero settings. The norm, for the most part, is that capes and even villains don't kill people, and when they do, it's seen as crossing a line. And so, if you like kill someone and it gets found out, people are more likely to sort of gang up against you, and you'll get more and more pushback from everyone. And like, it's just like if you escalate a situation, arms will be brought to bear of equal measure, kind of thing. So, people toe the line and they push the limits and they try and like increase the bounds of what they can do, but a lot of things they just can't get away with because like more heroes would come to the city to catch them, or the villains would gang up on them, or like something. Like there's just reasons why they try not to kill people. Uh, Pretty much like political reasons within the Cape Society because you just have to maintain a balance of power. The behavior of Lung and the direction he's taking the ABB were out of the norm, and there are, oh yeah, I just said that. There are balances of power and unwritten rules to be maintained. And then I think part of what makes her decide to go is that if she doesn't go, the status quo will continue. Um, to which Vic said, "I'll be a bystander?" And then this seems to be the point at which, that she decides to go. And she thinks about this as a window of opportunity that will close if she lets time pass. It's a high risk, high reward operation, and she'll have to while away the afternoon trying not to think of all the bad things that have happened to her if she doesn't do this. So she's got to do this. A woman comes up behind her and asks her if she's done with the computer. Taylor's freaked out and relieved when she turns around and it isn't Tattletale. And then Taylor says, "Give me 30 seconds." And then she sends the message, "See you at 3." And then end of chapter thoughts from Vic is that I think so far to Taylor, Regent equals bystander, Tattletale equals bully, which is why she has a preference for Gru and automatically sees him as an ally. Then there will be the huge shift later on with different character interactions. Got into spoilers with that thing. And then, let's see here. 2 plus 4 times 5 says, someone once described Worm's no-killing rule of thumb as, if Batman killed the Joker, then Mr. Freeze would feel justified in shooting an icicle through Batman's head. Yeah. And then David says, Jesus, yeah, that pretty well sums it up. Yeah. Does anyone else have any end of 2.5 thoughts? Because I'm about to move on to 2.6. So yeah, Taylor shows up in costume as a precaution. She thinks about how it's knife defense and identity defense. No guarantee they'll keep their word and not be in costume. Plus, her costume actually has a decent amount of like armor to it. So I think if she was hit by like a bat, wearing the costume would do a significant amount to reduce how much that hurt her. Like maybe save a rib from getting broken or something. You know, because yeah, you can get like really destroyed by regular weapons. Taylor catches a bus home, puts half of her costume on under the street clothes, and talks about the costume again. I think I'm actually going to just read the costume description here because it's kind of complicated, and when I tried to sum it up, it was like kind of messy. Let's see here. Most of the armor panels of my costume were separate pieces, held in place by straps that ran into slits in the fabric of the costume. Not all of them were, though. I'd made some of the armor part of the bodysuit. I'd made narrow, rigid sections of armor running along the center of my chest, back, shins, wrists, hips, and tops of my shoulders, so that when I strapped the larger pieces on, grooves on the underside of the armor would fit over them and help to keep them from flopping around. I checked myself in the mirror before I left. I didn't think anyone would be able to notice unless I held a strange posture, and they were paying a great deal of attention to what I was wearing. Yeah, so, she doesn't think anyone will be able to tell that she's wearing the costume pieces, but still feels painfully conspicuous. Let's see here. David says, not logistically feasible, but still. Let's see here. Taylor changes the same way she did last night, and then Vic goes, forgot this was last night, laughed my ass off. Taylor going a hacker was definitely due to 2 hours of sleep. Regular clothes that were she's wearing regular clothes over her costume, and they're super loose fitting clothes, and she's got a backpack that she brings the like remaining pieces, like the bigger armor and the straps and the mask, etc., etc. So she goes into an alley to change in like she had done last night. And then imagine showing up to school in a lightly armored bodysuit. You'd be the most powerful high schooler. And that was 2 plus 4 times 5, and then David saying those things respectively. Yeah, I don't think she ever goes to high school in it. I think because she goes from the school to the library to home to the alleyway. And I think she's never quite foolish enough to wear her costume at school. And then, yeah, so she goes in one end of an alley, puts on her costume, puts her regular, like, big clothes into the backpack, hides the backpack, goes out the other side of the alley. And then when she's close to the fire escape where she had gotten to the building before, she sends a dozen flies to scout. And I find 12 scout flies to be just the funniest idea. If we ever get the Worm anime or the Worm graphic novel, the ways that Worm could actually be adapted decently well, then what I want is for there to be a shot behind this tiny, like, group of flies, like they're little fighter planes. That would be just delightful. Bug senses are super different from us. Not only different sensing methods, but they also have different speeds because of their tiny brains and bodies. So they like probably react to things a lot faster because like actual thoughts take physical like chemical processes to run through basically, and because they're so condensed, it's just that much faster. Um, Brains are weird. Um, Muted senses give the power. The muted senses given by the power are a way to not overwhelm Taylor's brain, and she's able to allow more or less to come into her mind. Vision is like ink blot monochrome of light to dark and fuzzy to sharp, and sound needs to be blocked out most of the time by Taylor because it's really distracting and she says almost painful. Mostly consists of either deep bass noises that like kind of rumble her mind or like high-pitched scratching noises, and having those sensations from hundreds or thousands or even more sources all at once was just like super overwhelming. And when Taylor's power was new, she wasn't able to block that out for the first like I guess couple days or week, unclear exactly, but several days at least I think. And she was never actually like hurt by the power, but she was just like constantly miserable. And now she's able to block it out and does so most of the time. The most reliable bug sense is touch and positioning. She's able to tell when they're moving, when they're static, and when something else is moving them. She's able to tell where all the bugs are in relation to her. The location info translates well. Probably the most useful aspect of her power at this point is her battlefield awareness that she gets from the like locational data of the bugs. We talked about it during the lung fight, but she can just kind of coat an area in bugs, and anywhere where that they aren't is like either unsafe ground or like it's like filled in space. So like lungs, flames, they can't go close to, and then like walls, people, trash cans, whatever in the street, like all the terrain, she just knows where it is. And right now she kind of has to have bugs on stuff to know where it is and like keep track of everything, but she definitely gets better at this, and later I would say she can like map out an area and like even just keep it in her mind. Her like mental abilities definitely grow a lot over the book. What I was going to go to next is that there's a dozen blurry angles to see the same three blurry silhouettes, and we're going to go ahead and change the art now because we're seeing the fly vision. Oh, hell yeah. Fly vision. And so that they are on the top of the building where she had fought Lung last night and met the Undersiders. She puts bugs on their faces and senses no masks. First of many times, she'll casually put bugs all over people's, like, just bare skin without worrying about how, like, gross it might be to them, personally. Vic says that people in this universe almost never notice. It's weird, but whatever. And then says maybe she's gentle with them. I think people do notice more than Taylor notices them noticing. Because, like, later on we'll see from other people's perspective, and they'll, like, think about how weird and disgusting they think she is. So, yeah. And then let's see here. Taylor thinks about how it might not actually be them, but climbs the fire escape anyway. David says he loves this art. I agree. I think this is great. It's not exactly what I had envisioned, like, perfectly, but just you vaguely get a sense for each of the three of them. Like, this is probably way clearer than she can see. but it just looks so good that I don't care. Like, I'm glad we got this, you know? And Greg, of course, says, it's Riku. They're put bugs in him. Referencing just some bonkers Kingdom Hearts dialogue. And then, once she's able to see them with her own eyes, she has no doubt it's actually them. She recognizes them without their costumes since she's already expecting the three of them. Like, her mind is primed to see through the civilian identities and tell that it's them. Whereas randomly passing by one of them on the street, she might have no idea. Together as a group, expecting them, it's all there, you know. And we get Tattletale's appearance out of costume. Same girl, loose braided, dirty blonde hair, freckles on the bridge of her nose, right where the domino mask covers, and the same vulpine grin as in costume. She's wearing a long-sleeve black t-shirt with a graffiti-style design and knee-length denim skirt. Vic says, she literally dresses so bad. I blame Wildbow for this one. Not a women's fashion expert. But when we talked about it more, Vic was saying that, what was it? It was just like more major roasting of her fashion sense, and then later said she wasn't even sure it was Wildbow specifically, but like Tattletale. And I kind of think it's a combination of being like an early Wildbow thing, because obviously by the time you get to like Ward, he's like really good at the outfits and stuff, or at least I think so. But Vic had later gone on to say, even Tattletale's costume is ugly as fuck. Or AF, as the kids say. And then the next thing I said is, it's those green eyes that Victoria hates. And Victoria's always saying that there's too many green-eyed people in media because it's just, like, not realistic. There are so few people in real life with green eyes. But, you know, whatever. It is what it is. Regent is smaller and a younger guy. Taylor estimates that he's about 15, like her. His hair is black and curly. He's got a pretty boy look with a triangular face and full lips. Possibly French or Italian. But spoilers, he's French. French-Canadian, that is. David, I would mostly classify your eyes as not like bottle glass green, like they say about Tattletale. I just don't think that many people have a bottle glass green eye. Like, how would you describe the color of your own eyes, David? Green wise. But let's see here. Moving on because of the chat delay. Taylor basically says that Regent is hot, but in a way where she's dissing him too. Vic's version of this is, he's hot, but in a beta kind of way. More blue-green. Yeah, David, I'm gonna be honest, I'm sure that your eyes are part green, but when I think of your face, I think of blue eyes, so... yeah, just the way it is. The white jacket, jeans, and sneakers he's wearing are all pretty normal sounding. Nothing out of the ordinary. He's sitting on the edge of the roof, sipping a cola. And then when she's describing the way that he looks, she describes a bunch of celebrities. And David says about hot, but in a way where she's dissing him is, or hot where he's a beta is still hot though. Yeah, when she's describing him, she kind of like lists celebrities she thinks of as pretty boys, and the list is okay. If I were to change this, I would want to remove most of the celebs that are on this list, because I wouldn't want anyone who was born after 1982 when the time split happens, and I would only probably want someone who was like Hollywood royalty, like Nicholas Coppola Cage, to be on this list, because Most likely, even in Taylor's time split universe, he would be famous because his dad was like a super famous Hollywood guy before 1982 happened. So, like, events for that would probably play out in a similar vein. Um, but this is a good reminder that this is more or less set in the real world and not some completely fictional setting like Gotham or Genosha or whatever like that. Um, and Vic says about the change of that list. I agree, but I think they should mention fake younger celebs to hone in on it. Um, and I agree. I think that'd be great if there was like a couple really well known real world celebrities and then a couple fake ones. 2 plus 4 times 5 says Justin Bieber's last name being spelled Bieber. Can we chalk that up to alt history stuff? David says the Mandela effect. Yeah, I I don't know that he ever spell checked Justin Bieber's last name. I think that's the honest thing I can say about it. Gru is super tall. Like, it was probably obvious in costume, but like out of costume, Taylor feels it even more. She thinks he's like a foot taller than her, so he's maybe like 6'8", which is not unheard of course, but it's pretty tall. I think I've only met a couple of people in my whole life who are that tall. And I met a lot of people. Taylor mentally describes him in a very sensual way. That's the way Victoria described it, and I agree. It makes it clear from the start that she's attracted to him, which will continue going forward. She describes him as having chocolate skin, which, you could look at in some ways, but I think it's just like she's really into him. He's got shoulder-length hair currently in cornrows, but we'll see in the near future he will take the cornrows out. And I don't think he has cornrows again. I think he mostly has like basically all of his hair into a ponytail, and it's like a poofy ponytail kind of thing. You know the kind, I'm sure. We've all seen a poofy ponytail. And then Greg says travelers probably get some real weird Mandela effect, but like for real. Yeah, true. Taylor thinks about Gru's masculine lantern jaw that she associates with superheroes. She's got a lot of positive traits here and links them to her personal aspirations in her mind, I think. He's wearing jeans, boots, and a green t-shirt. Taylor thinks about his hot, sexy arms, and Vic says, she's so gross, and then laughs. And then the phrase that I thought was funny that I pulled out was, this was a guy who worked out. And then moving on, Tattletale wins a bet with Regent. Vic says, dumbest shit Regent has ever done. This is one of the last comments from Vic because I was so far behind that I didn't have any more written when she was reviewing it. So, that's a good sign. Regent pays up to Tattletale. Taylor guesses what the bet was about. She thinks this was a bet on whether she would show up or not, but Tattletale... I think Tattletale was already sure that she would show up. And they had bet on whether she would show up in costume, and we get the idea that Regent has lost a lot of bets to her, and for some reason keeps doing it. Gru tells Regent that it was a sucker bet because showing up in costume makes sense. Even if it wasn't Tattle, will be the first of several times that Gru tells Regent not to make bets with Tattletale. Gru introduces himself as Brian and shakes Taylor's hand. Taylor is clearly attracted to his voice and to his firm handshake. Taylor says to call her Bug until she comes up with something better, or believes this isn't a trick. Tattletale introduces herself as Lisa. She doesn't put her hand out to shake, but Taylor doesn't get a bad vibe from this. She just thinks that Lisa's the type of person, isn't the type of person for handshakes. Regent says he's Alec and tells Taylor that bitch is Rachel. This is where we move on to the explanation of why Rachel isn't here. Brian says, she doesn't agree with the aim of our meeting here, which leads into a pretty good back and forth that feels real to me. Brian and Taylor have a lot of good awkwardness. It feels like they're actually interacting, and they're like two cautious people who don't know each other trying to navigate this weird scenario. Like Taylor's trying to get information and Brian's trying to keep her interested in the conversation long enough to offer the position on the team. Taylor asks what the deal is with them revealing their faces. Brian says it's as a show of trust. Taylor looks between each of them and can't read their expressions well enough to get anything useful. She asks why they would need a show of trust. Brian turns the conversation over to Lisa for a bit. David says, looking for love in the worst place possible. Yeah, Brockton Bay. Brian turns the conversation over to Lisa for a bit. She holds out a lunchbox for Taylor. Lisa tells Taylor she's following through on what she said from before when she said that she owed her. The lunchbox is considered sort of an iconic object for most Worm fans I've talked to. I convinced Vic to delay making the lunchbox the art for this week because I needed that fly vision. It's so cool. Look at it. It looks so good. And Vic hates it. Two good reasons to have fly vision. And so we're going to have the lunchbox on a later episode. And we should be good to go. Let's see here. Where was I? The lunchbox has Alexandria on it. She's one of the top members of the Protectorate. She's been there since the founding of the Protectorate. She was Taylor's favorite hero when she was a kid, and she represents a lot in the story. We'll talk about her in more depth later, but she was the classic flying brick in Power Set, and she's been fighting since as a hero since the 80s. Her costume is black and gray with a helmet that covers the top half of her head, and her long black hair flows out from below the helmet. Taylor is confused and asks if the lunchbox is a collectible before Lisa rolls her eyes and prompts Taylor to open it. Finally grabbing the lunchbox, she feels the weight and realizes what's inside. When she opens it, she's caught off guard, realizing how much money she's holding. She sees the 8 snacks of $2.50 each, and before she can even think of the full number, Lisa says, $2,000. Not sure what to do, Taylor closes the lunchbox and stays silent. And this is where we get a comment from M, talking about the chapters, because M was not able to make it this week. I did want to say, these chapters almost made me more empathetic to Taylor, ? Like, I'm less like, oh my fucking god, when it comes to the way she narrates. The thing that made me think that was her dialogue with the trio, the thing that made me think that was her dialogue with the trio, Gru and the others. I got the feeling that she really puts up that guarded, better than her peers, tough guy facade, but in reality, she really is scared and nervous and a bit of a bumbling dummy when it comes to her entering this world of the capes directly. Like when Tattletale hands her that lunchbox full of money and she's like, is this a collectible? I was like, okay, that was kind of endearing. 2 + 4 × 5 says, I love how much of a geek Taylor is. Yeah, I agree. It's funny. Taylor, ooh, is this a collectible lunchbox? Lisa, just open it. Yeah. Lisa says that Taylor has 2 options. She can take this as a gift and hopefully count them as a friend when they run into each other in the future as villains. Lisa mentions that between the turf wars, the beefs, and all the similar stuff, almost all the villains in the city will attack them on sight. When Taylor asks the second option, it's Brian who answers. This could be her first monthly salary if she joined the Undersiders as a full team member. Taylor looks between them and doesn't get the impression this is a joke. Each one of them has kind of what I would consider their standard expression. Lisa has a bit of a smile, Alec looks bored, and Brian looks serious. I mean, it's just like, yep. 2,000 a month. Brian tells her that's just the base pay from their boss to stay together as an active team, but they make way more than that with their actual jobs they pull. Taylor makes note of the idea that they have a boss. Taylor thinks back and realizes that Rachel didn't want to join the meeting because she didn't want Taylor to join the team. When Alex says she voted no, Rachel voted no to Taylor, Brian hurries to add that the rest of them all voted yes, and Rachel didn't want to split the money 5 ways. Taylor asks about if they've tried to recruit before. Brian says that Rachel scared off Spitfire before they could even offer the spot on the team. Spitfire joined Fault Line's crew, which is a local villain mercenary group. They tried to recruit Circus, and she flipped out on them, yelling about how she works alone in a way that even taught Alec some new swears. Ooh. And then Taylor says, so you're going the extra mile with no costume as a show of trust and a cash bonus up front to get me to join. I said as the pieces came together. Brian talks about how even more than before they need more muscle because with Lung gone there will be new territory fights and stuff like that. So he lists us, Fault Line's crew, the remaining ABB, Empire 88, the solo villains, and any out-of-town teams or gangs that figure they can worm in and grab a piece of the bay. David says, knowing what we do about Rachel, it seems weird that the money would be the line she draws. I don't think that So, Rachel doesn't understand the money per se, but in a real microcosm, the promised idea is that Rachel can get enough money so that people will leave her alone. And, that's how Coyle pulled her in. That's how the team keeps her in the jobs. She just wants more and doesn't think it's worth bringing in more people because she thinks, I basically think she thinks she can fight everyone on her own and she doesn't need a team. Even if, on some level she can acknowledge that that's not true. She's just so hostile. The only people she kind of gets along with are these 3 who are meeting Taylor, and she doesn't even like them, so, yeah. And then 2 + 4 × 5 says, they think they can worm their way in. Oh my god, title drop. And Greg says, so that's why it's called Worm. That should be the name of the podcast. So that's why it's called Worm. Anyway, he says it's only a matter of time before they get stuck in a fight they can't win. Taylor is like, I don't get it. My power sucks. Then they go through a back and forth about how she did in the fight against Lung. Taylor sees it as a bad showing because she was nearly killed, but Lisa says that she did most of the work in the fight, and Lung normally beats whole teams at the same time. She talks about the bugs Taylor used. Taylor doesn't know the real names, but she knows what the Venoms do. Taylor's shocked because the Venom shouldn't have put Lung in the hospital. Lisa says that his healing could have stopped healing him at some point along the line. Lisa tells him that a bunch of his flesh rotted off during the time his healing wasn't in effect because of a doctor making a really stupid call, basically saying that normally poisonous bugs only bite once, so it wouldn't make sense that they were bug bites or something. And it's just like, come on, bud. What if there was just more than one brown recluses and they all bit once? That'd still be the same situation. Come on. And then it goes back and forth, but eventually Lisa says he'll grow everything back, because Alec, they talk about how his flesh rotted off, and Taylor remembers, oh no, I bit him on the crotch zone. And then Alec makes a joke about this and is like, I'd be out for blood if somebody made my man bits fall off. And Brian is visibly annoyed with him at this point and says, thank you for that, Alec. Way the two of you are going, our potential recruit is going to run off to have a panic attack before the idea of becoming an undersider even crosses her mind. I feel like I can't deliver Gru lines because I'm just not like, I don't got the masculine voice. I feel like I can do a Lisa voice and feel confident about it, and an Alec voice, but probably a lot of characters like Rachel and Brian, I'm just not going to be able to do it. I don't even feel like I feel okay about my arms master, but and then 2 plus 4 times 5 says, to be fair, it's hard to tell the difference between a brown recluse bite and a normal bug bite, at least until the flesh starts necrotizing. Yeah. And then Greg says, I'm not sure if that was a typo. Greg says, have to David back on to voice. Oh yeah, have to have David back on to voice Brian. Yeah, David could totally voice Brian, and David would be my Rachel too. Yeah, let's see here. Taylor asks how Lisa knows that stuff and how she knew Taylor was at the library. Brian is also clearly annoyed with Lisa having dropped the library line in the email earlier. Lisa ignores him and winks at Taylor. Girl's gotta have her secrets. Alex says Lisa's half the reason they haven't failed a job yet. Lisa says their boss is the other half of the reason. It's clear that Lisa knows something that Brian doesn't hear, but we move past it for now because Brian doesn't want to bog down the conversation with business they've already gone over in the past. Lisa smiles and makes what I think is a solid pitch. If you want the full scoop, I'm afraid the details on what we do only come with team membership. What I can tell you is that we're a good group. Our track record is top notch, and we're in it for fun and profit. No grand agenda, no real responsibility. David says, I accept. Oh, and by the way, we had David on last week, and sometime in the future he'll be on again, but Greg has agreed to co-host next week, and then in 3 weeks we will have Victoria co-hosting again, so got a pretty good lineup so far. Taylor goes through this in her mind and is able to justify joining the group. It wasn't like I was signing the deal in blood or anything. I stood to gain so much. And then she says, all right then, count me in. Yeah, and that's when we get to the end of that chapter. David says, very stoked for Greg episode. Sam says, brown recluse usually doesn't kill a person. The worst that can occur is the amputation of a limb, removing and skin grafting the damaged tissue. But Black Widow can have a more lethal bite since it not only affects tissue but the neurological system, which can lead to death. Very good stuff. Sam coming in with the big brain knowledge. I'm like, spider, cool. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So let me see. I feel like I had a bit more to say about this last part. Like I said, super behind on the script. Yeah, so yeah, Taylor decides that one of the main reasons she uses to justify this is finding out their boss and feeling like she has more questions than answers. But I think it's pretty obvious the real reason is that she wants to spend more time with these people, and they're the only social interaction that have happened in a long time for her that wasn't just strictly negative. Sam says, you're perfect, thank you. And then 2 plus 4 times 5 says, Neurotoxin OP, please nerf. Um, so, yeah, I think I'll just jump into if anyone has any last thoughts about 2.6. I mean, there's tons of stuff in there, so feel free. But I'll start talking about the themes a little bit. So I'd say, like, as always in the early stuff, like, bullying is sort of an ever-present thing. It sort of shapes the way that Taylor thinks. She's doing this to get away from her bullying. She's finding a path where she can feel good about herself and be around people who are, like, affirming to her. These are people who are complimenting her, who want her to be around, who want to pay her to be around. Like, they want to have her be an equal member of their team and everything. Like, obviously they're at exact cross purposes, since she wants to be like a traditional sanctioned hero, but it's clear from, like, a really natural human perspective that she wants to be with them, and she wants to like, have companionship and friendship. David says, I just love this meeting because it's the start of our transition into the more interesting aspects of the story. Yeah, I mean, I know that the lung fight is really, like thought of as either chapter 1 or the lung fight are thought of as, like, the inciting incident. And obviously, like, that is the very kickoff. But I feel like this meeting is so, like, fundamental. It's so much more of a keystone. Like, you can replace the lung meeting with her fighting a different villain, or, like, some other mix-up, or whatever. You can replace the bullying incident in chapter 1 with a different bullying incident. Like, this meeting is, like, pretty core, and you can't really change it out. Sam says, I also think since she is so used to bullying, she knows this is one place as Bug that she isn't bullied since she has no identity. Yeah, very true. I think this whole meeting, part of the story where she learns to trust a little more, tries to trust people. Yeah. I agree. And since there's only been people in the past trying to take advantage of her, her meeting with Arms. David says her meeting with Armsmaster / the heroes in general was so sour in comparison to these friendly villains. And it's true too, because the time that she met the villains on the roof, she was a little shocked, but it was clear, like, I don't know, it felt more like fun. Once Armsmaster was there, it was, like, kind of dour, even though she was, like, excited or whatever. And yeah, her, like, soured interaction with him and just these different things. And then 2 + 4 × 5 says, Taylor's brain, I can learn stuff about the boss, then I can turn them in, get mucho credit as a hero. Taylor's heart, I just miss having friends. Yes, I think that's pretty much what's going on here in a nutshell. That's a really good summation. And then, yes, moving from bullying, sort of determining how she's acting, to compartmentalization due to, well, not due to, like, the specific example of not thinking about Emma and using this as an excuse to move past that into a different, like, activity, different part of her day, different mindset. Very good at that. So this is the part where I was sort of behind. Didn't really get to it. For the glossary, I wasn't sure if there are terms here that I should go over, but I did want to at least mention the different teams that were talked about in Gru's little list. If anyone thinks there's any words in these 2 chapters that were worth me talking about and defining, then definitely let me know. But Fault Line's crew, yep, they're a local mercenary group. They're just in it for profit, really, but, like, the group themselves are they work together in sort of like a family style unit. They are very close and pretty emotionally supportive of each other. Pretty good team. If I was on a team, that'd be a pretty good one to be on. Um, the remaining ABB. So yeah, we've got the Lungs Gang, of course. The Empire 88, that's the Brockton Bay white supremacist gang. They're kind of huge. They have like lots of team members. The leader, Kaiser, will like basically try and bring in anyone who's aligned with his like goals, who's like a cape and a white supremacist, essentially. And he'll try and bring them in from all over the East. But he like burns through team members really fast because he's like the most toxic person ever. And so like there's lots of there's lots of E88 and former E88 members, and like we'll see in the story, he sort of gets a bunch of people who had quit the team to all come back at once, and has like just a boatload of capes, just a whole pile of them. Got to fight nearly like 24 of those bastards. And then they talk about solo villains and out of town teams. So solo villains in Brockton Bay, you've got like some people like Circus or Trainwreck. She doesn't even mention the merchants because I guess they're like low enough standing. But that's another Brockton Bay gang to be aware of. They're like I think it's like 3 capes at this point, and then like mostly homeless or unhoused people, let's say, and addicts that they sort of convince to follow them around, and they're crappy. David says Ratcatcher OP. I'm not quite sure what I said that that prompted that, but I'll agree. Ratcatcher OP, sure. Let's see here. Okay, so moving on to the characters worth really talking about. We've got Lisa. M wanted to add here, I also want to know what people's theories on Tattletale's power is, because we still don't know directly what it is yet, right? I was thinking maybe she can just sense people's powers, and that helps her narrow down on their location. I'm still so confused. Obviously, I don't want anyone who has read this book to answer that question, but anyone who this is the furthest they've read, feel free to add what you think that Tattletale's power is. I think it's really interesting hearing the opinions of first-time readers. I really want to get some first-time readers as co-hosts at some point to do the whole thing where I can like just legitimately ask them questions like, where do you think this is going? Like, what do we want going on? But, you know, I would pick a week when it's specific chapters where I think that will fit really well. Maybe something where a lot of like mysteries are talked about or whatever, you know, we'll figure it out. But I think that'd be great. Stuff about Lisa. We learned that in and out of costume, she doesn't look that different, but she does just the right things to sort of trick people's brains into not noticing who she is. She's got like kind of a bad fashion sense, very 2011. I don't know. We learn like lots in terms of her personality, but I feel like we kind of went over it a lot when we were talking about the chapter. She's very brash in a lot of ways. She likes to have fun. She likes to push the limits. She's one of my top 3 characters in Parahumans. It's like a close competition between Taylor and Lisa and Victoria. And it's probably not Taylor. It's probably Lisa or Victoria, to be honest. But anyway, moving on. Brian. Brian is great. We learned that he is, like, we knew he was tall before, but we learned that he's like huge. He is very warm seeming. He is the most welcoming to the team. He's clearly doing the most to push her joining in terms of like open action and so forth in his direct words. And I mean, I think he was really impressed with the way that she was able to nearly defeat Lung in terms of like doing enough damage that the dogs were the clincher. So he's probably really, really wanting her to be on the team. And I think that's cool, and that comes through. And he is generally a nice guy throughout the story. Like, he's a really cool dude. Um, yeah. David says Brian is definitely the mom of the group. Yeah, I agree. I agree. He's the team mom for sure. As Weld would put it, uh, he's the team's heart. And actually, as Regent, well, I don't know if I should. I don't want to spoil too far ahead as far as some things, but Brian. And then we get to Alec. He's bored, he makes bad bets, and he's here to annoy Brian. That's what I had said, and then Vic's version of it was, he's here to annoy Brian and steal our hearts, and we're all out of Brian. So, yes, Victoria is in love with, or Vic is in love with, Regent. He is for sure her problematic fave. And I believe that's her last comment here on the whole thing. It was the only character I had written anything about when she read through. Rachel, she wasn't directly seen in this chapter, having skipped the meeting as she was against inviting Taylor to join the Undersiders. Rachel doesn't like people, doesn't want to split the money more ways, several things. We'll see more Rachel later. Greg says she's really got a thing for French Canadians, huh? Yeah, Vic loves French Canadians. Moving on. Powers, knowledge, and world building. Didn't really write anything on this yet, but Powers can find you at the library. Beware. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, like, we get to see a lot of powers like Tattletale's, where we, the audience, are going to know what Tattletale's power does, but, like, other characters who are dealing with her don't understand what her power is for most of the story, most of both books' story. So it's just like nobody knows. They're always like, what the hell does she do again? Knows things? 2 + 4 × 5 says, if Brian is the heart of the team, then Alec is the gallbladder, because he doesn't really do much. Oh, shit! Shots fired. Greg says, Tattletale knows all kinds of things she shouldn't. Yeah. I think that's a decent, yeah. Taylor, it should be safe to lie to them. Yeah, exactly. Then we get the what else did we learn about powers this time? We kind of learned that Long's healing power at its base value is not enough to stop Venoms from flesh rotting him. We learn later that this is because he was tranquilized at the time by Armsmaster, but I also think that his healing power at its base level wouldn't have been enough, because when the fight ended, his healing powers would have stopped, and if the venoms hadn't been purged from his system, then he would have just, still gotten all venomed. That's the word, right? Venomed. For the audience participation, oh crumb, let's look up what was the audience participation from last week. I know I got an answer from M about it, but I want to read what we had actually asked specifically. 2 plus 4 times 5 says, fortunately, Tattletale's power only works through public computers, so as long as Taylor doesn't go back to the library, she should be fine. And then Greg says, envenomed. So let's see here. For the audience participation question, it was, oh, I didn't write it in the thing. Oh my word. Do I have the other doc? Just a second. How terribly unprofessional of me. You know me, a consummate professional. So last week's questione. Of any power you can think of, what's the most interesting drawback? Yeah, that's what it was. And then M said, I like the idea of a jester power, where every joke you tell puts people into an absolute doubling over laughing fit, crying and all. But the joke that you tell every time is literally just your mom. Is that a drawback? I think so, but you never know. And everybody else, feel free to put in your drawbacks. I'm trying to think of my favorite drawback from parahuman power that actually exists in the setting. There are a lot of like ones that I think are funny because I don't like the character and so a bad thing happens to them, but that's just me being a little barbarian. So that's not the ones I'm looking for. Oh, I think it's funny that Clockblocker's power can stop time, but he can't tell how long it's going to stop between 30 seconds and 10 minutes. I think that's hilarious. And then Sigma Dragon says, or Greg says, so Schwoopsie if she was a parahuman. Yeah, pretty much M wants there to be a character who's just Schwoopsie from Firebringer, and she always tells the joke. But the thing about the parahuman power is it works every time. So she gives in to her worst instincts, and she never writes a new joke, only ever using the joke. We think a terrible drawback from a parahuman power. There are so many to pick from. And I don't mean case 53s either. That's just sad. Well, whatever. If people think of cool drawbacks, they can put those into some sort of Discord. I'm sure that we can save it for later. But I actually don't have a good audience participation question lined up. So this week, the audience participation question will be... Oh, David says, a water power, but you can only use water from your body. Yeah. That would be hilarious. 2 plus 4 times 5, Leet's drawback is one of my favorites. Yeah, it's funny. I think the fact that he can make anything but only once, like, that's hilarious. He's just not good at being a parahuman. Yes, and for audience participation this week, You know what? This is super basic, but would you want to be a hero or a villain? And would you want to do it as like a solo or on a team? Would you want to be hero in terms of like a corporate sponsored hero, a solo hero, a government hero on an independent team? Would you want to be a villain who like does vigilante justice? Would you want to be like a villain who makes a lot of money? Like, what would your thing be? And yeah, talk about that in the audience participation on the Discord. I saw that somebody new joined the Discord today, and I wasn't sure if that was 2 plus 4 times 5, our only fan that is not already one of my friends. But if that was you, then and hello to the Discord. And if it wasn't, then feel free to join. I have now included the Discord link on the YouTube homepage. So that's there for anyone. I mean, obviously, if you come in and you act badly, you'll get banned. But it's just kind of usual courtesy stuff. Just like be nice. Um, and let's see here. I guess that's it. I'm gonna read the links. Um, this was all brought to us by, of course, Wildbow Writing Worm. He is the author of the story, and you can find his Patreon at patreon.com/wildbow. All these links are in both the YouTube and the Discord. The full text of the work is available for free online at parahumans.wordpress.com. And there is also a fan-made audiobook of the entire work at audioworm.rain-online.org. And yeah, think that's about it. We'll be meeting at the same time as normal next week at 1 o'clock Mountain and noon Pacific on Saturday the 12th. The chapters we're discussing are chapters 2.7 and 2.8. They're pretty good. We gotta stick with this trio, and we gotta learn more about them. David says, "Great stream this week. Thank you very much. Thank you. I had fun. I was worried because of the whole finishing the script while we were listening to the audiobook thing. But it gave me confidence because it made me realize that even if I totally drop the ball and have nothing, I think I could still feel okay doing a stream. And I'll be working with Greg on the script, so hopefully we can get that out pronto, and I can work on the week after that, get ahead. But everybody have a nice rest of your day. I love you guys. Bye.